Welcome to the RiCE podcast, where we meet people who thrive in the toughest environments. I'm Colin Howe. I'm joined by
Aaron Edwards.
And today we're joined by Jonnie and Dylan to share lessons on resilience, perseverance and growth. Let's dive into it. Chaps, introduce yourself. Jonnie, you can start.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks, Colin. Thanks for having us. It's a real pleasure to be here. So I'm Jonnie Barlow. I spent 14 years in the military, and since leaving the military in the last few years, have set up RenderSafe with my partner Dylan. We're very lucky over that 14-year career to have built up a really sort of strong skill set. We've been taught very, very well by lots of sort of very experienced and clever people. And we've now found ourselves in a situation where we feel like we want to sort of not give back. That sounds, it's a charity. That's not what I'm talking about. But what we've seen here, that there's a real opportunity for us as a business to feed back in. So that's where we are. Yeah.
That's super. Dylan?
Yeah, so I'm ex-military as well, but I was New Zealand Army, which Jonnie holds against me.
Absolutely.
A lot of people hold that against me. I commissioned in 2011 to the Royal New Zealand Army Logistics Regiment, then became an ATO, which is where I met Jonnie in 2014, so it's an ammunition technical officer. And then I spent the majority of my career really supporting New Zealand Special Forces as an EOD commander, initially domestically and then for the expeditionary output, and then finished up the career 12 years later in 2021. And then Jonnie and I launched RenderSafe in 2022.
Fantastic. So, right. So let's dive into these careers, shall we?
Okay.
It's so starting out as young men in two different services.
Yeah.
How does that compare?
Yeah,
if you can.
Well, interestingly, and again, we've just found out that I know Aaron from nearly 20 years ago when he was teaching me at Sandhurst. So I had the privilege of going through the officer selection route. Went to Sandhurst. Trials and tribulations along the way, but ended up joining the Royal Logistic Corps, and again, as Dill alluded to, went on the ammunition technical course, and we kind of, and that's where this sort of relationship started, and where we had a sort of synergy right from the off really. I had a real privilege then of working in 11 EOD regiment, so providing the UK's sort of regional bomb disposal and ammunition support to the authorities. Had a great time there, and had the opportunity to upskill, do lots of training courses, really sort of solidify that sort of skill set. And then had the opportunity to go and work with various other units in the UK, trips around the world, opportunities to work with partner forces, and train lots of people around the world, it was a real privilege on my part, but it also made me understand that we're asking our people to do an awful lot, and actually a lot of the time we're not providing them with the requisite support. Whether that be well-being, whether that be training, whether that be kit and equipment, So I think
this is at all levels.
This is at all levels, really. So it's I think one of the things that sat with me wherever I've been, and I've come away going, those people are being asked to do more than they should with the quality, the level of training, the level of kit and equipment, the level of support they've been given. And that really came away from almost every sort of instance of operational or training. So that was where the sort of the understanding of the need came from in terms of that, and that's why Dylan obviously felt similar, and that's where that's why RenderSafe was started off the back of that career. Huge opportunity, wanting to actually feed some of that expertise back in that we've been able to garner over time, and at the end of the day, make people better at their jobs, make the world a safer place.
100%.
And Dylan, for you, it's was that the same? Growing up in the New Zealand forces, or
Yeah, I think New Zealand Army is quite small. I think it's somewhere like 3,000 people. Going through OCS, which is the equivalent of Sandhurst, it was one platoon.
Wow.
So quite a bit different, right? So you build some real deep friendships there, and sort of I look back on that time with a lot of happiness in what we went through together, because it's a pretty special time. But from that point on, I share a lot of similarities with Jonnie, and actually, especially when we came into the EOD world, what I recognised was that, and special operations as well, actually, there's a unique set of stresses in those environments, whether it's the training or the operations, and the consequences of that for people can be pretty severe. And anyone in the military can relate to this, or anyone who's served in the military. But what Jonnie and I recognised was, when it comes to the training and the support and the human performance elements that surround that, there's a lot more work to be done. So when we set up RenderSafe, it was very much with that foundation that we wanted to bring commercially, but really back to the guys that were the world that we served in. But otherwise, very similar. The only other thing I'd say about the Kiwi Armed Forces is that the core belts, there's not as much rivalry between the core belts as there are in other
Good
armies.
thing or a bad thing?
I would say sometimes it's a good thing, right? Because in certain countries, which I won't name, there can be some backstabbing and there can be a little bit of tall poppy syndrome and things. But my experience in the New Zealand Army was that actually, no matter what your core belt was, there was good friendships there and good camaraderie. So.
Okay, it sounds like a bit of a dig at the British Army there. So
I said I wouldn't name the British Army as I'm just saying.
We're all mates.
So love that. So
working in coalition then, because essentially that's what you're talking about, partnership and coalition. How did you find that, working with other militaries?
Oh yeah, I mean, Jonnie, you go first.
Well, I think it does depend on the nation that you're going to support, and some of them, there was had a huge amount of hubris and were like, who's this guy, despite the fact that their skill levels and their experience were very low.
So was he really grumpy when he came to it?
He's always
grumpy. I was going to say. That's a good answer. But actually, conversely, there was a huge amount of people that I've worked with, both in the military and subsequently, that know inherently that their job is really dangerous, and why would you not want to be as skilled and as experienced as you possibly can be if you have to go and start poking around with things that potentially could end your life and the lives of your team and everyone around you. So we're in a really unique opportunity that through all of this training, that you have access to people who are learning a skill that potentially will save their life or not, and there aren't that many other skill sets where something as defined as cut that wire is the difference between success and catastrophic failure. There aren't many points, and that's why we're really excited about the human performance element that I'll let Dylan go on with later on. But we have an amazing opportunity to reach these end users who are being put in very, very difficult situations. Going back to the main point, most of the people who understand that that's the situation they're being put in are more than willing to listen to you, generally because you know a hell of a lot more than them because of the level of training that we've received.
Because it's a highly skilled profession, it's tactical, but it can have real strategic effect and impact. Did you find that when you were sort of competing against an adversary that you were learning about them too, and about how they were trying to improve their kill rate and make life difficult for the military? So that's the thing that I think most people miss, is your opposition.
100%. I mean, I think in EOD we have a threat triad, right? Which is, what is the aim of the perpetrator, what's the device, and what's the ground, or what's the location, right, of that device. And when you're teaching and developing people's threat assessment, it ultimately comes back to those three things. But what Jonnie and I have recognised is that the closer and closer you get to the device, i.e., let's say, in standard EOD, you're going to be using robotics, so there's going to be an element of distance there, or you're going to be using semi-remote means. But the closer and closer you get to that device, especially if it's a victim-operated device, the greater the danger and the greater the risk. And the environments that we've been in, we've got to train people for high risk, low frequency exposures to these events, right? So that's a different paradigm, and it requires a different way of training that mentality. So the perpetrator's always at the front of mind. What is the threat? How are they trying to achieve their aim to either kill us or achieve their aim in terms of targeting whatever they're targeting? When you're in an assault IED environment, or what we call, let's call it advanced manual techniques environment, where you're now in close proximity to these devices, that becomes key, more prevalent than anything else, is to understand what are they trying to achieve, and then how can I work backwards from that point.
Yeah.
So for our watchers and listeners for this assault IED, let's break that down in sort of basic terms. What are we talking about here? From the infanteer clearing to the SF world, how does that look? Because your world is a little bit more uniquer than perhaps your original origins, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a simple definition is EOD support to special operations or police special tactics groups. What does that look like? Well, we're talking about assaults normally, so an assault would be any type of high-risk arrest or even a kill.
So how does that look, as in, you going into an environment, so coming into this room, how does that sort of look?
Yeah, so if you imagine an assault team going into an urban environment like this building, they're probably going to have to make entry somehow, whether that's explosive means or mechanical entry, and then they're there to do a number of things, either an arrest, a high-risk arrest, a hostage rescue, or potentially, in some theatres, it would be a kill capture mission, right? So that's the environment that assault IED is designed to support. There are sort of other things that go with that, exploitation operations, tactical site exploitation, but they're kind of wider. But that's the core of what assault IED is all about. And
then from the threat side of things, where are those threats? So you talk about the door. Surely that's the first step, isn't it? Right? Or maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the differentiator and what Jonnie and I teach and train to the people that we're working with is that the threatscape, if you like, or the threat landscape of assault IED is so much more complex, because it could be, as you say, it could be the door, it could be the perpetrators, it could be the hostage. There's so many elements of the environment that are a threat and a risk, not just the IED. Getting to the device is actually one of the harder things. I'm sure Jonnie will share this story shortly, but there's plenty of infiltration skills just to get to the door in the first place. Then when you get through the door, you're still not necessarily at the device, right? So it's conceptualizing those challenges for anyone that's not aware of these environments or how they work. But getting to the device, then dealing with the device, and then the device itself doesn't necessarily have a human element to it. It might be trying to impede us getting to the real device, for example, which could be on a hostage. So it's a really dynamic situation, and like I said, it's high threat, low frequency. So how do you train decision-making skills for those environments? And that's what we're doing.
That's one of the key problems, Colin, I think, is that we can't sit there and say to someone, the door's a threat, the corridor's a threat, the window's a threat, the chair's a threat, because they could all be a threat, And so what we really try and do, and we'll delve more into it, but we try and educate the operators so that they can make an informed decision, so that they can make a dynamic risk assessment, take in all of the environmental information, everything that's coming into them, and then come up with a satisfactory conclusion by themselves, not us dictating to them a set of standard operating procedures or ways they deal with things. And this is why we often talk, don't we? EOD is it's almost like a game. You've got the perpetrator or the terrorist, the bomb maker on one side, then you've got the EOD operator on the other side, and there's all sorts of other moving parts. There's the SWAT team, or the Special Forces team, or whoever it is getting you into that location. It's other members of potentially those groups, but it's pitting your wits against them, you know, and then realising that actually they might have got something wrong, you know. So if you had built the bomb and put it in a place and wanted it to function exactly how, you know, you envisaged it to function, you know, well, we could have done that. But actually someone else might have got that wrong. So there's not only trying to pit yourselves against the wits, the skill, you know, all of those other things of your adversary, but there's also that element there that all of these other external factors that could mean that something is out of place or wrong, or, you know, so it's you know, it really is, it's that ability to instill in people the understanding so that they can make their own decisions, which is difficult to get duty holders to sign off on. Do you know what I mean? That's the problem. Someone likes a list, you know, and if you go through all of these tick boxes, you won't die off that bomb. But
not that simple, is it?
It might take you 3 months to get to that point. You know, if one of them's wait till the power source drains, you know, well, actually, you might be sitting there for a few months. So, you know, what we're trying to do is instill people and allow them to pick and choose which ones of those are relevant to this situation, and then you know,
sounds complicated.
Yeah, way of advice.
I mean, the layers there. I mean, fire is a weapon.
Yeah,
delaying you from coming in.
Yeah.
You've got devices, you've got operators potentially, you've got live people that might be going against you or pitting against you. Just
miscommunication, you know, people telling you
so
things that aren't actually true. So you're getting fed intelligence, you know, real-time intelligence from people who are fighting their own battle at that moment in time. They're having a physical, emotional, cognitive battle right there and then, you know, and having the ability to then relay accurate and detailed information to you in a timely manner so that you can do something is, you know, is a
this is multitasking gone mad, right?
It's really difficult. It's really difficult.
Multitasking is not possible.
Yeah, and I think you know, this is why me and Dylan feel so passionately about this, because we're asking our people to do things in really dangerous situations that we're not training them appropriately for, you know, that and that's where the emphasis lies on, you know, higher and up. You know, if you're a duty holder, you need to take that responsibility and just sort of, you know, a few of those tick boxes is not. I want to be careful.
Can you share with us and our viewers and listeners vignettes that you might use in your training to try and impress upon those duty holders why it's so important that they you know, do a proper estimate of the situation before they send anyone in to you know, render a device safe?
Yeah, the vignette that I always use, or the explanation that I always use, and Jonnie talk about this a lot, is if you look at the literature and the science of decision making under pressure, there's been some pretty amazing academics that have done this work. There are two key things that come out of the literature, and one of the people that I follow quite closely is Professor Mark Williams. So he looks at expertise, specificity of training, and repetition. So if you're talking about high stress, low frequency events like we're talking about, and you're expecting your people to perform under that pressure when the moment comes, if you're not training specificity and giving them the opportunity to get as close to the real environment as possible, and you're not putting reps on the board, quality reps, through deliberate practice, you're failing those people directly. Now, too many units spend too much time focusing on getting to the device. And these are the vignettes we use, and I'm going to ask you to share that story in a second about getting down the fast rope, because it's the best example of this. The infill skills that you need to get onto target, right, there's a, what do we call it, a compliance thing there, right? Obviously a health and safety piece, so you've got to be fast rope qualified. Some people have to be para, maybe you're dive infill qualified. It depends on what troop or what squadron you're a part of. But ultimately there's a lot of time spent on those things, and for good reason. As EOD operators, that should be dealt with, and we should have enough of those skills, but we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that we need to train for those high stress, low exposure events, and that's time in lanes, whatever it might be, in scenarios, in very dynamic environments, making the decisions that you're going to be making. And that's the reality that we try and push up the chain to say, if you're not doing that, you're failing your people.
Probably time for the fast rope story, I guess.
The French Paris.
Oh, right, okay.
Is this going to be a shaming, or is it a well done?
No, it was it was a look at that idiot kind of gig. But no, I absolutely just reiterate what Dill's talking about, and rightly so. And we concentrate on blue light driving, we concentrate on underwater escape training, dive training, all of those things, really, really important. But that comes with a detriment to actually EOD training, and that kind of falls off, and people think that if they get them to the bomb, then that's okay, and that's not the point. I had very, very quick vignette, but I learned a lesson from it. We were fast roping onto a vessel, middle of the night, out at sea somewhere, fast roping onto a vessel, and there were already some commandos that had got onto the vessel, so they were sort of lining the top of this vessel. Anyway, turned up, fast rope went out, full team in front of me went down, and obviously if you're the last guy down, good idea to hold on to the rope, because otherwise the downdraft from the helo just sends it, and if there's anyone, can really hurt. So I'm holding on to this rope.
It's not going to end well, is it?
I let go of the rope as it starts to lift off, not really thinking about it, and then obviously there's just the deck of this ship that is wet, and downdraft whips my legs out and fires me. I must have been about 15 metres into a fencing, and I just heard this like uproar of the commandos all around. Les Anglais, way. And then I turned around and realised that the entire team had disappeared off into the bowels of the ship somewhere. I had no idea where I was going.
So you done him no favours.
I know.
He set me up.
He just dropped him on it on the camera.
But this is the complexity.
This is the complexity.
So actually that could absolutely happen. The team go down. Yeah. Because, and rightly so, the team that you're there to support, and you are there as a toolbox to support those operators to allow them to achieve their mission here. So I'm not, I don't want to big up my status here. If I'm not used and no one sees me over the whole operation, and that's a Brucey bonus for everyone, that's how we want it. Unfortunately, these things happen. Last in the stick, you hold the rope, you get taken out basically. By the time you turn around, ship's dark, everyone's on nods, going through the bowels of the ship, Yeah, I mean, I found him eventually, but it wasn't a fun time, it wasn't, and so it's teaching people about having agility and having agility across all of the facets that we're talking about. This is cognitive agility, this is physical agility, this is emotional agility, which is one of the key things. You turn around, black. Something's going on. What do? You have to be able to have that bandwidth and that sort of capability. Say, okay, right, this is a pretty crap situation. However, I have the skill set, I have the exposure, I have the understanding to deal with this or get myself out of there. And that's what we're trying to instill. And I'm talking more about dealing with a bomb than getting into the shit without losing your team, take it as you will.
But it's an important lesson, right? Because it's, you're there to do a job, which to some extent you're tunnel visioned on, but then you're doing other skills, and it might be just something as simple as that you train for, fast roping onto a deck, and then it just goes wrong, right? But probably your head's more here than it is here. Yeah. And if you're not, and I know where we're going with this, but if you're not, tuned into that, it just, you're just in the wrong place, and it's going to go wrong, right?
Yeah.
I'll give you another example, Colin, because one of the elements that we have to understand as well is there's a shoot, move, communicate, medicate piece to this that underlies the ability to even get into these environments. Now, when we started off in New Zealand, we had an assault IED capability that was unarmed in support of New Zealand police. And so the idea would be you'd have an EOD operator that would get called forward under armed escort, and they would deal with a device or an explosive threat or an improvised threat in situ. But they would be escorted, right, and protected by that special tactics group. Jonnie and I don't see that as assault IED. Assault IED is embedded support to that unit, which means that you have to shoot, move, communicate, medicate to a level where you're not a liability, but you're fully integrated into that unit. Now that's different because now your threat perception and your decision making isn't just about the device, and that's why I love Jonnie's story, because getting to the device is one of the hardest things to do. Once you're there, you're it. You're the only person that can make the decisions, and you have to make those decisions to save your team and the people that you're potentially there to save. So in the middle of that is the shoot, move, communicate, medicate part. And the story I tell is when we started fully integrating back home, we had members of my team that were asked to go and support armed policing. Right now, putting New Zealand soldiers onto the streets of New Zealand, there's legalities around that. There's also, there's a public perception piece as well. But obviously, New Zealand Police couldn't provide that capability, so we needed to provide it for them. And we had a number of situations where, if it wasn't for the training that the guys had received in shoot, move, communicate, medicate, there could have been some really bad situations in terms of threat identification. So the point is, it's not just about the IED. It is the whole thing, getting to the IED, understanding the integration with the team, understanding that you're there to do a very specific role, but you're also there to integrate with a team that has multiple skill sets across that team. And that's what makes this environment and this particular role pretty dynamic.
I was going to say, there's nothing like it. You think about assault teams going in, medics going in alongside. It doesn't really happen in an integrated way, does it? This is probably the only, what you guys are specialising, it's the only role out there that does that in an integrated way so far.
To the extent, and I think it's because as EOD operators, it takes a lot of time to develop the skills to be able to make the right decisions and carry out what we call threat assessment. Which is a throwaway term for a lot of people.
I think we've come across quite a lot of special forces operatives over the years from all over the place, and they said to us, well, look, I'm DEMS trained, just teach me how to do IDD, and it's like, well, okay, well, that's, we did 18 months of study, in the background, the chemistry, there's, all the science and the mathematics to work all that out. Then you go and do courses, and it's another, 3-4 years until you get qualified to towards the top anyway. So, there's a real lack of understanding there. People think that bombs are just bombs. They're not. They're improvised explosive devices. So someone has come up with an idea and come up with a target and decided to fabricate something out of whatever he can get his hands on, and has fabricated some sort of trigger mechanism.
Normally contained in a sandwich box. Right?
Absolutely, yeah, a bit
with a 9-volt battery.
Yeah, I'm not going to go too much into modern threat per se. I don't think it's right for
stick with the sandwich box.
Yeah. But no, I think what I was alluding to is the fact that the world is changing, by the day at the moment, and whereas for a period of probably 40 years, most of the IEDs that we came up against had a similar sort of flavour. They had some sort of 9-volt battery, and they had some sort of mechanical or timed switch that would then, allow that to function. Now what we've got is the advent of Arduinos, of microcontrollers, Raspberry Pis, where, in reality, a 9-year-old can go online and create something that is absolutely terrifying for someone from looking at it from our position. That potentially is going to make the world a much more dangerous place for assault operators and EOD operators around the world. So the training needs to increase significantly as opposed to status quo.
I think you're pointing to a very good point there, which is that the education for those in the kind of opposition or threat role has increased exponentially, that they're able to get their hands on this information very easily through online means. I mean, how do you make your trainees aware of that dynamic overlay of an environment, a digital environment perhaps it's enabling for their adversaries?
One of the answers is that we do it ourselves. Don't want to get myself in trouble there for Googling too many things, but you've got to do it yourself. So you've got to build devices, inert devices, but you've got to build them. You've got to understand how bomb makers make bombs. You need to stay up with the play on current technology. So we're in the world of artificial intelligence now. Gone are the days where you had to scour the internet to find the information that you needed, or go to a library that you needed to find information from multiple sources. You can discuss things online with large language models now that can provide you with a lot of information.
Let's leave that there.
Right? That
I'm actually surprised that you had the internet when you were in. So
oh, that's a dig. You got me back for the British Armed Forces piece. That's fine. I got it. Yeah.
Go on.
But yeah, the short answer is that we have to expose the people, EOD operators, to the technology so they understand it. Yeah. If you don't understand it, done. You can't deal with it.
Yeah. So we do this on the travel safe courses, which you've attended.
Yeah.
In fact, both of you have. And it's one of those where, you know, we talk about begging, touting, mugging, and all that sort of stuff. And it's really interesting when you put yourself in the space of the bad guy. Yeah. Because you see it from a completely different angle, and it's fascinating. Because it helps you almost understand that world. But I mean, this is a different sort of level. But I think you have to do that to really know what you're dealing with.
100%. What you find is that EOD operators that have spent time as the terrorists, so some lucky people get to go and sit in sheds and build devices for a year or 2 years of their careers. But actually, what you find is the majority of those end up being really, really good, really sound, EOD operators that have that level of understanding, And we're not suggesting that we're teaching people how to go down the road and identify, something's powered by an Arduino and it's got ultrasonic sensors on it and those sort of things. And those are some really complex challenges that are facing EOD operators in this day and age. But there are skills and there are TTPs that you can learn in order to mitigate all of these threats. Inherently, it's a dangerous business. This is specifically assault when you're knackered. You've run up and down a building 3 times or a ship structure 3 times, and then some big bloke's screaming at you to get rid of an ID, and you're like, it's like it's one of those situations where like, what am I doing here? I made some bad life choices, didn't I? But as soon as you get to the end of it, then you're like, no, okay, there for a reason. If you can bring everyone home safe, that's the crux of it, isn't it? That's the end of it.
So you're out of that military world.
Yes.
You're in the commercial space now, RenderSafe. Mm-hmm. This is a quick question. Do you still have a shed in your garden?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a garage.
Okay, that's where the action happens.
Something like that. Yeah.
Let's look at RenderSafe. So we understand where you've come from. We understand how you've identified that there's a gap here. There's an integration model that's required. We're talking about the human performance of how to almost balance that as well, all the processes of that, which is a lot to unpack. And Dylan, we'll get you back for that one another time. But RenderSafe, what's the unique selling point? It's we're probably already touching on it, but what is it? Are you allowed to tell us?
I think we've explained it, but if I was to try and say it in a few words, like you've got to create environments for these operators to be able to practice their skills, and you've got to push them to the edge, right? So what we're doing is we're bringing a 3-pillar approach together, which is the training, the special effects, which allows us to basically create these dynamic environments, right? So think Hollywood special effects, but in a military environment. So now your brain, which can't differentiate between real and imagined threats, it has to believe what's going on in the environment because we're forcing it to. And then the third part is the human performance element. So that's how we're approaching it, and that's based on our personal experience, but also what we've seen in the literature of developing expertise.
Yeah. I think and that's we really understood that skill development underlies everything. Then inoculation. Putting people in those situations so that their body gets used to it, not through repetition, not through blind tasks, but through that immersion into those scenarios and those environments. And you know, a lot of the feedback we've had specifically from a lot of the explosive special effects that we've used is guys have saying, oh, I've trained on that area 100 times or 200 times. You know, today it was like I was in a different place. It was like, you know, it was like we were in battle, because there was huge explosions going off and they didn't know where the next rounds were coming in, and ricochets off walls and everything. You know, adding that level of sort of you know, realism, high fidelity, yeah, you know, to the situation. Guys are coming out and going, wow. You know, that's a different level of training. And then obviously the final piece of the jigsaw puzzle is optimizing the individual. You know, and then we talk about, you know, providing the right kit and equipment, developing the right stuff to give to people so that they've got the toolkit, not only skills but equipment wise in their case. So yeah, so we're on a journey, aren't we? It's
I guess it's all unique as well. It's like, where do I pull from my belt kit and all that sort of stuff? You know, having something slightly an inch to the right or left can mean a
I mean, and a lot of that's personal preference, you know. But I think one of the key things is you have to understand is that if you're jumping out of a helicopter, you have to deal with any situation that you come across. You have to deal with what's on your body. Yeah, and I always say this. Whenever I used to fast rope, I was way over the weight limit. Okay, I'm not talking about me personally. That might have been the case as well. But the amount of kit that I was carrying, you know, I was carrying an X-ray generator on my back. I was carrying, you know, plates and a full toolkit with, you know, way too much. But I knew that if something happened and I ended up there, that was falling on me, you know. So I'd rather carry the extra weight and, you know, and miss the weight limit for that, as opposed to not have the kit and equipment there, you know. So it's, yeah, but it's on you, Colin. You've got it with you. You know, there's no police cordon, there's no, you know, big white truck or robot tooting up the road behind you. You know.
So on the high performance, human performance side, how do you teach agility, mental agility and acuity?
There's the question.
Okay, so this is fascinating, right? Let me tell you a little bit about how we've got to where we are and the way that we look at this before I answer the cognitive piece. So when I started off in the unit, we were just going through a sort of refresh of our human performance program, heavily involved in that. And one of the elements we were looking at was breathing behaviour, but not through the lens that most people look at it now, which is about breathing mechanics. You know, how do I breathe in terms of a intervention or the type of breathwork strategies that might come to most people's minds. And we started working with a pioneer in this field called Dr. Peter Litchfield. And really what he's pioneered is two things: the understanding that breathing is a behaviour, it's a habit, and it's individualized to us in different environments. So we can learn to breathe specifically in different environments, and that's totally individual. The other thing he pioneered was what's called capnography, educational capnography. If you're not familiar with capnography, it is a medical device. It's been around for over 80 years. But educational capnography, non-invasive tech, is measuring end-tidal carbon dioxide by placing a nasal cannula in the nose. And that allows us to be able to see how does that person's breathing mechanics serve their respiration, their chemical axis of breathing is what we call it. Now that becomes pretty interesting information to see in real time, right? Because now when we go back to the cognitive piece, in these high stress, high consequence moments where you're making decisions, how are you responding? How have you learned to respond, right? And this is what we're looking at now, and we can see it not only in human behavior, we can see it in objective biofeedback. So we've integrated our approach that way to try and tease out, is it a skill development issue or is it a self-regulation issue?
Yeah. So, I mean, the science behind that, the medical science behind that is fascinating, because if I found myself in that environment, I'd be, freezing for a start. I'd be considering flight. But, you know, and most people do that in that kind of scenario. You're coming in as a specialist. How do you approach a device that really could kill you if you make one false move?
Training.
Yeah, don't think about it quite like that.
Right.
I would go in with a mindset slightly differently, that's setting you off on the wrong foot. No, I think, it's really interesting. We have all these conversations. It's so, if someone says to you, or let's take pregnancy, when a woman's giving birth, like, breathing is such a huge proponent of it. You've got to do this breathing and this breathing and this breathing. So there's a real understanding there that breathing is massive. In the military we get taught box breathing. You need to breathe like this. Breathe. So there is this sort of anecdotal understanding that breathing is hugely important, but no one has really, gone in and taken the time to fully understand it.
And understand it in the environment.
And understand it in the environment, absolutely. But, so there's the tracks across, like we alluded to before, we are in this amazing opportunity where I can, stand behind the guy and, we can look at his biofeedback in real time and we can see what is going on inside it. And it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating, because you see a guy's, breathing goes haywire, up, down, all over the place. His respiration is really messed up. Then you see the cognitive, adaptability and agility that we talked about start to decline, and you see he's like, and he's looking around desperately for answers. Then when it comes to that emotional and speech element to it, guys will turn around and just come out with the wackiest stuff, and you see, the amount of times that you get a referral or whatever, it's like, oh, I'm stood, I've got a suicide bomber next to me. He's, it's like, you've got a suicide bomber next to you. It's like, yeah, he's sat on a chair, he's talking to you. I'm like, well, is he a suicide bomber or is he a hostage? Because there's a real differentiation there between, don't stand next to suicide bombers, hostages, you're more within your rights to. But it's fascinating, and this is what, I'm very privileged to be a part of what Dill's pioneering here. But, we can see in real time people struggling. And then the whole point of it is that Dill will carry on, but you can then train that, and you can teach people self-awareness being the first thing, make people aware that, mate, you've just held your breath for 45 seconds. It's like staring at a tripwire.
That's how it's
there you go, that might have been it. And then he's going, like, oh, if I touch this, I'm probably going to die.
I grew up with a really hefty dose of Hollywood movies where it was blue wire, red wire, and it didn't get any more complicated than that.
So rounded all the way. So you're covering all aspects. My last question then is around training somebody to understand. Are you dry training this before you throw them into that environment, or sometimes mixing it up depending on the experience of the room? Because ultimately, throwing somebody in, you're going in blind, and they're going to flap. Because it's a new concept for them, potentially, even the most experienced operators. But I think from a training perspective, there has to be that step into, right, this is what we're doing, this is a dry run through, and then you flavour it up when you get to it, don't you? Right?
100%. This is stress inoculation theory, what you're talking about, and that's our approach. Is that is it a skill development issue? If it is, then they need to develop those skills before we put them into the crucible. Right,
cool.
But ultimately, what's missing?
Sounds terrifying.
Yeah, it's actually very pragmatic and very phased.
Humbling.
Humbling, yes, but phased, right? Like we're talking about training a human being, and if they can develop those skills, and then they can progressively increase the stress in which they can use those skills under, that is by definition stress inoculation. But where we've seen the missing link is that in the middle of that is your unique stress responses, your unique way of having learned to do things, to self-regulate, to attempt to try and take over your breathing, for example. If you don't see that and you don't understand that component of it, you're missing an entire opportunity to build self-awareness through to self-regulation for that individual.
I think one term that you haven't used there that I would think is quite relevant to this is trigger. Often there is a trigger to someone's downward spiral in terms of their own performance, and so that might be the physical exertion that they have to use to insert into the location. So if it's a 4K tab and you're a big lad to get in there, then actually by the time you get there, that exertion might have been the trigger that has completely messed up your breathing, and all of your other facets start to...
I'd imagine that could be something that's different from the environment, like going into a room that you know is a dangerous environment and then seeing a cute teddy bear in the corner and going, that's my random. And it just throws you off kill, doesn't it?
Or some, each one of us is individualised, and we have our own, so it might be that someone's got a fear of heights. Now, it's a rubbish job, but you might have to jump out of a helicopter or a plane or whatever else, Actually, is that, jumping out of a helicopter on a live op with the, with rounds coming in or whatever, is that the trigger? So you get to the bottom of the thing and you go, oh my God, or did you break your legs last time you did that? All of these things, and where might that trigger sit, I think is...
Yeah, we bucket it into 4 elements: cognition, emotion, speech, and exertion. And Johnny's point there about exertion, that's a key element, because most people think about exercise, but exertion is what we do. Whether we're sitting here at my seat, no exertion, through to running on a ship to a device, which is full exertion. Whereas exercise has certain connotations about it, right? But all human experience falls into one of those buckets.
Fantastic. Fascinating.
Resilience.
Absolutely. Right, on that cheery note. No, love that, gents. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having us.